we do have another project in the pipeline that I can't tell you anything about yet, but
Tell me
watch
after.
this space. I'll tell you after.
Hi guys, welcome to another episode of Interval Conversations. I'm joined today, I think he's this side, I can never tell on the recordings. One of these. We're joined by Daniel Swift from Concrete Youth, which is a company based in Hull, who work with like multi-sensory shows and touring productions. So Daniel, how are you doing?
I'm well, thank you. How are you?
I'm very good. Would you like to tell us about your company? Like, how did it first come about?
Okay, so Concrete Youth is a theatre company based in Hull, and we make multisensory theatre for people living with profound and multiple learning disabilities. We also have an education department that offers sensory stories, sign language initiatives, and other workshops for schools and education settings. The theatre company came about when I was a drama teacher at a special needs school in Lincoln, and I wanted to take my students to a performance at Christmas, to a show, and I couldn't because there was absolutely no access for them, and there was no show that would be suitable for their needs and that would cater for their needs that they have due to their conditions. So I ended up diving into tons of research into inclusive theatre, accessible theatre, and theatre that is made exclusively for these audiences. And I've found hardly anything because there are no companies really that make this sort of work. There's a very, very slim amount of companies in the UK, including ourselves, that make this sort of work, meaning that the provision for these audiences is next to none. And that's where Concrete Youth came from, really. And we're now just under a year and a half in. And here we are, really. We have a team of 3, and we're growing by the day. So here we are.
Yeah. So what process did you go through to develop your team? It's to build it up to what it is now.
So it was originally me for maybe the first 2 or 3 months. And then, funnily enough, Belle, who is our associate director, I didn't know her. I had never met her before in my entire life. And we were both at a meeting, like a group session with the artistic director of the new diorama, David Byrne. And I was just chatting to him in the session about Concrete Youth, about what we do and the audiences we work with. Anyway, about 5 minutes after that group, Belle came running up to me and said, "Get me involved. I love what you're doing. It sounds amazing. Can I please?"
That sounds like Belle.
Yes. So we had tons and tons of coffee. We had loads and loads of different meetings. And over time, a relationship grew, and it developed into a position for her in the company. From then on, it was essentially us 2 working together, building the company. And then about 2 or 3 months later, no, 2 or 3 months ago, rather, Annabelle, so we have 2 Annabelles in the company. There's another woman called Annabelle who I've worked with in the past and is currently at the University of Hull, who works a great deal with adults living with additional needs. And she was really interested in what we do. She was really fascinated by the work that we make. And we had, again, lots of coffee, lots of conversations, and that, again, developed into a role for her in the company, which is outreach officer. So we've kind of grown the team quite organically, really, and now here we are, and the company's developing day by day.
Yeah. So would you like to tell people what productions you've put on?
Yeah, absolutely. So the latest show that we did was To the Moon and Back, that premiered at Hull New Theatre in August last year. Now, that show was supposed to have toured this year, but coronavirus happened, so that isn't a thing at the moment. So keep your eyes out next year for the next instalment of To the Moon and Back and what we do with that next year. We do have another project in the pipeline that I can't tell you anything about yet, but
tell me after.
I'll tell you after. But yes, so that's in the pipeline waiting to be announced, but I can't right now. And we have 10 million different projects that are in our plan to happen over the next 3 to 4 years. Now, To the Moon and Back, especially, I'll talk a little bit about To the Moon and Back and about what that entailed and the considerations we made for our audience, shall we say. So, To the Moon and Back was based around a little boy called Alex, who had quite a poor relationship with his dad as a result of the loss of his mum. Now, long story short, Alex, along with his babysitter Lena, goes on a adventure to outer space, to the moon, to Mars, and around the galaxy, basically to save the world from an incoming asteroid. Now, through the course of this journey, Alex and his dad, Gareth, then have their relationship amended, and they fix their relationship, and they're closer than ever. And it's a really lovely story. And it all happens through Alex's stories that he writes, and we kind of like jump into the storybook, and it's lovely. Now, when we performed that show, and when that show was premiered at Hull New, we're really keen. What we make with our shows is we're very keen for it to always be a show with accessibility integrated. We never want our audience to feel like they are a second thought. We never want them to feel like it's a show for mainstream audiences who are neurotypical and we've just thrown a few bits into the show at last minute to make it accessible. Every single part of our shows are always designed, made, rehearsed and performed for our audiences. So, for instance, all of our shows include a multisensory play. For example, in To the Moon and Back, we had a moon rock where we were on the moon, and our audiences can touch, feel, look at a light up moon rock. When we saved the world from an asteroid coming, the asteroid broke into millions of different pieces, and the audience could feel, smell, touch, play with the pieces of the asteroid. So that's a little bit about the sensory play that we do, but then there's other considerations that we make as well. So, for instance, our actors are trained in Makaton, which is a certain type of sign language. So they're trained in Makaton, and they sign along their lines throughout every single performance so they can communicate with their audiences. Lights remain on throughout all performances. We design our shows so there's no sudden bangs and no loud noises, so our audiences don't become distressed or agitated throughout the performance. All of our venues have a chill-out room next to the performance space, so if our audiences, despite our best efforts, become upset, they can just leave the room, go and relax, and come back in whenever they're ready. Our actors are trained and rehearsed for our audiences to make as much noise as they like. Also, for them to leave their wheelchairs and actually walk around the performance space and sit on the set if they like. That's completely fine, and we never want our audiences to feel like they can't do anything, or that they have to be quiet, or that they have to sit in silence. They can do whatever they want. This is their space to do whatever they want and enjoy themselves as much as they can. There's tons more that we do, but that's a few that I can remember off the top of my head.
So you were talking about how the actors are trained for like people coming up, being loud, this. So what process do you go through when you're developing these shows so they are trained to that point?
So all of our actors, we have a huge amount of conversations with all of our actors, and we spend a great amount of time talking with our actors about some of the conditions that some people living with profound and multiple learning disabilities live with. Often how that affects their lifestyles and the people around them, and also what to expect throughout all performances. We often provide resources and links and websites to our actors as well, so they can do further reading and further research if they require it. And then when it comes to rehearsals, we literally, the creative team ourselves, we literally go up onto the stage, we literally sit on the beds, we literally run up to the actors and hug them whilst in the middle of a dramatic monologue. We do anything that could possibly happen during the performance, so they are ready and prepared during the performance. We sometimes shout out. We sometimes, I think one time one of us turned off the lights in the theatre. Like anything that could possibly ever happen, we do, so they're prepared. And because it's really important to us as well as a company that whilst our audiences, whilst the audiences can feel like they can do that, they should be encouraged that when they're in public, very often the parents and carers especially find that they very often have to quieten their children down a little bit, or have to find a way that the people are very often staring, and we don't want anyone to feel like that ever. It's encouraged for people to come up and go on our adventure with us. It's encouraged for them to shout out if they want to. It's entirely fine, and which is why it's instilled in our actors from the beginning to get used to this, because this is the way that we work, and all of our actors have embraced that in all of our shows, and it's a beautiful part of our shows that our actors are so passionate about our audiences, that they encourage us themselves, and it becomes a beautiful part of the show that we can create a real bond with our audiences, and it's lovely.
That's good. So could you tell us about, because I was having a little look on your website earlier, and I noticed you've got like sensory storybooks and workshops you provide, so could you tell us about them?
Yeah, absolutely. So Sensory Storybook is an initiative that we launched at the beginning of this year, which is basically, we had a conversation as a team, and it became really clear to us that we can only, as a company, have the capacity to tour or make maybe 2 or 3 shows maximum per year, meaning that our audiences are only having access to sensory arts on a professional level at maximum 3 times a year, which is not enough. When neurotypical people like me and yourself have access to the arts on a daily basis, if we require it and if we want to, 3 times a year is a ridiculously slim amount. So we wanted to find a way that we can increase the level of sensory play and sensory arts that our audiences have access to. And that's how Sensory Storybook came about. Sensory Storybook is an initiative that we've developed with a charity called Life for a Kid Foundation, which is a fabulous charity that has a multisensory facility in Hull, on Leonard Street, just off Bev Road. And we basically work with them to deliver sensory stories on a monthly basis. We use their facilities, they're really supportive of our work, and that developed into a partnership so we can provide these sensory stories to our audiences on a really, really regular basis. This scheme will then, over the next few months, develop into further regions, and it'll expand across the UK, which is an exclusive. No one else knows about that, so there you go. But yeah, so that's the aim, and we really want to be able to work with our audiences on a more regular basis than just 3 shows a year, where they come to our shows, they go, and that's kind of the end of it until the next show. We want to be able to form a relationship with our audiences, where they become part of the Concrete Youth family, where we work with them on a monthly basis, sometimes weekly, and then they come to our shows, and we develop a relationship with them on a first name basis, and they have a real connection with us as a company.
Yeah, that's good. So what do you find the hardest part about all the work you do is?
I think it's probably having to plead our case as much as all the time, if that makes sense. I think multisensory theatre for audiences who are neurodiverse and audiences who have profound and multiple learning disabilities, it's a very, very new style of theatre, and these audiences are a very, very new audience segment. I think I find myself quite regularly having discussions with theatres, with venues, with funders, with partners, with lots of different organisations, basically telling them this is a really, really valid style of theatre, and these are valid members of the community that does not have access to theatre. And I find myself having quite regular conversations with them, sometimes arguments, where we're having to basically say, we are valid, and our audiences are even more so, and they deserve regular access to theatre, which is what we're dedicated to doing and dedicated to providing. So I think the hardest part is being able to be on the same level playing field as as theatre companies for neurotypical audiences, and viewed that way as well, where we are programmed as regularly as mainstream theatre companies, and we are programmed on the same level and in the regular program as mainstream theatre companies as well. So I think that's probably the hardest part, is pleading our case and defending our audience's right to access cultural and artistic events.
What do you find to be the most rewarding part of your work?
Working with the audiences, I had this conversation. We were on BBC Radio Homicide last week at some point, which when this goes out will be months ago, but still.
Yeah.
We were on BBC Homicide a while back. And I was speaking to Kofi Smiles on there, and I had a similar question. I think I was saying that it's definitely the audiences. Seeing the look on their faces is just gorgeous. When we did To the Moon and Back at Hull New as our last show, I was in floods of tears at the back of our theatre, and all of our creative team was saying, "Are you okay? What's going on? What's going on? What's going on?" I was like, "It's just gorgeous. Like, this is lovely." A ridiculous amount of these audiences that go through our theatre's doors have never ever been into a theatre ever. This is their first time going into a theatre. Some of these people were 25, some of these people were in their 30s, and they've never stepped foot into a theatre. That to me is ridiculous. And the joy on their faces, the absolute delight when we were providing them with a show that is exclusively made for them, that is designed for every need that they could possibly have. It's just gorgeous. I was in floods of tears. The carers, the parents were delighted with the work that we've done, and they couldn't thank us enough. And it really proved to us that this is a massive thing that needs to be done on a wider scale, which is why I was so dedicated to doing it and providing as much work as possible, because these audiences deserve it and they need it and they have a right to it. And at the moment, they don't have this regular access, which is why we're doing it.
And final question, do you have any advice for anyone wanting to set up their own company?
Get support. I think that's a really, really big thing. We are really, really lucky where we are based in Hull that there are so many schemes, initiatives, and programs that support upcoming emerging theatre companies. There are so many producers, so many companies, so many artistic development schemes that are literally designed to help you set up a company and help you as an artist grow your company or even your individual practice as an artist. I think getting as much support and talking to as many different people as possible will really, really help. And I think secondly is just work. I think when it comes to running a company, especially one that tours nationally, I think a massive thing that people perhaps don't think about before they go into it is that it is going to be a ridiculous amount of work. Like, I was up until 2 a.m. last night writing emails and writing plans and writing agreements and writing policies and writing other things that people don't even think about that need to be done when you're in a theatre company, but they're essential. So yes, don't underestimate the amount of work that you need to do that is going to be done, but also don't underestimate the rewards that you will benefit from once all that work is done. But to support you in doing that, there is a ridiculous amount of support programs, development schemes out there to help you do that as well. Same with us, we're more than happy to answer any questions. We're more than happy to meet for a coffee when we are allowed to. We're more than happy to have conversations with you about how you can run a company, how you can develop audiences, how you can apply for funding. But we're more than happy to have those conversations if you send me an email, which is available on our website.
Yeah. That's good. So Daniel, thank you for joining me today. You can find Daniel and Concrete Youth on Facebook, Instagram, the website, any other sites? Twitter, Bieber, all those sort of ones. Well, that's been another episode of Interval Conversations. Thank you for tuning in.